Thank you. So, this is not my first time at the California Academy of Sciences. In fact, my first time here was before most of you were born. It was in the 1960s when I first came to California. 1966, actually. And I had my first glimpse of this part of the planet. Took a field trip, starting a bit north of here and going all the way down to south of San Diego, looking at the rocks, the seaweeds growing on the rocks, the birds, the critters, with a team of phycologists from the University of California at Berkeley. You may not know what a phycologist is, so I'll tell you, it's a seaweed person. If you don't know, don't worry about it. I was at Harvard University for 2 years as a marine psychologist. They didn't know what a phycologist was either. But in due course, I got to be the curator of phycology here at the California Academy of Sciences. And my passion for seaweed has not diminished at all. In fact, it just gets better the more I know about critters, plants, and other things that live in the ocean. And if I had a wish, I wish that we could take what we now know and go back to the 1960s. Or why not go back 100 years, or maybe even 1,000, armed with what we now know about our capacity to change the way the world works. We did not know that when I was a kid. Didn't even know it. A lot of people still did not realize the capacity that one species, humans, have to alter the nature of nature, and therefore the systems that keep us alive. And at the heart of it all, of course, is the ocean, the blue heart of the planet. That in particular has seemed to be a place that humans simply could not affect one way or the other. We put laws in place in the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, and we're still doing it based on the premise that somehow the ocean is infinite in its capacity to recover, no matter what we put into it or whatever we take out of it. But we're getting better. We're getting a lot better. We're seeing now an awakening of what no other creature on the planet has the capacity to know. And that is, we can look back into the past. We can look around us in ways that were simply not possible just a few years ago. And to anticipate the future in ways that no other creature on the planet can. And armed with that knowledge, it's pretty clear that we have an unprecedented opportunity to grab the future, embrace the future, and armed with what we now know about what the limits are to what we can do to the air, to the water, to the wildlife, the animals, the plants, the living systems, the fabric of life that makes the planet function. That we now have the chance, not just in our lifetime, but in anyone's lifetime. Never in the past have we known what we've known. We now know what we're never in the future. Will there be an opportunity as good as what we now have available? Protect the ocean? Nobody thought that was necessary back in the 60s, or literally any time before. We really got the message about the land. Early in the 20th century, Theodore Roosevelt and a number of individuals during that time and the years that followed recognized that humans really can and have altered the land and caused the extinction of many of our fellow creatures. But the ocean just seems so vast, so infinite, that the capacity to diminish its ability to generate oxygen, or to take up carbon, or to produce fish that people like to munch on. We just didn't know that we could alter those systems. Well, now we know other ones. And that's why I think we, you, those of us alive right now, are the luckiest generation ever to be on the planet. Because we're armed with knowing what we could not know not very long ago, and it gets better all the time. More's been learned about the ocean, literally, since I first took the leap back in the 1950s, and during all preceding history. It sounds like a big, bold statement, considering that people have been out on, around, and to a very limited extent under the ocean long before the middle of the 20th century. But, when Rachel Carson wrote The Sea Around Us, published in 1959, knowledge about hydrothermal vents was simply not known. In fact, the existence of great mountain chains down the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Ocean, not known. The role of microbes, the existence of so many microbes in the ocean, not known. We just did not know how important the ocean is to keeping us alive, our life support system. All of these things come into focus. We didn't know that we could take fish, the sea, infinitely resilient, down to unprecedented low levels, armed with technologies that didn't exist in the 1950s, and the capacity to take and scale, find, capture, market creatures that had been well below where we could even reach going back half a century, or sometimes even 20 years ago. So the good news, always the good news, now we know. And we are now armed with that knowledge. And I love it that, going back again, half a century ago, those who put on masks and fins and scuba tanks were kind of considered peculiar. In fact, as a scientist, I always thought that it was just too much fun to be taken seriously, and something that a scientist could do and really make legitimate observations. In fact, papers were published on how being underwater, spending time, getting acquainted with the creatures there, could, seeing a fish swimming in something other than lemon slices and butter, could actually change your perception of those creatures. I mean, what if Jane Goodall only knew about chimpanzees from looking at dead critters that were grabbed by hooking them from airplanes flying overhead or dragging a net through the forest, occasionally catching some of those animals, but to know how they live and what they do, it really makes all the difference in the world to be able to get down in the ocean and explore. That's part of the gift of the 20th century to us here in the 21st. Beginning to live on the ocean and see what's actually there. A lot of people still just look at the surface. And it's glorious to be able to skim over the surface. If you've been watching America's Cup characters out there, it's amazing. They go as much as 3 times as fast as the wind using the technologies that have been developed, mostly in the last 50 years, harnessing the wind to fly over the surface. But what about going down into the depths below? Well, we're pretty good now. Millions of people are able to get out to as much as 50 meters for a brief visit, sometimes a little longer if you obey the rules, decompress on the way back, or you can stay for a very long time if you don't obey the rules. It was not until 1979 that I had a chance to personally go down as much as 1,250 feet. I've been deeper than divers could go with little submarines, 500, 800 feet, deeper than I could go holding my breath for sure. But borrowing this equipment from industry, Oceaneering International, and a project with the National Geographic, I was able to get into this system that looks a bit like an astronaut suit or a walking refrigerator. In Hawaii, to see what it was like where sunlight just barely penetrates. I could tell up from down, I could see just a bit of light high in clear ocean water off the island of Oahu. Well, that inspired me as a scientist to see what could be done to foster new technologies. Because it's fun to go diving, but it's so frustrating to go out and look at 100 feet, 150 feet, and then you just have to stop. Because our physiology gets us in trouble unless we use special breathing mixes and lots of fancy equipment. And so, across the bay, in San Leandro and now in Alameda, I became involved with working with engineers to help solve some of the problems to gain working access to the ocean. And here's the thing, to make it so simple to do this, that even a scientist can drive a submarine. You have to with one person. If you want to get down there, you have to learn how to drive. Well, easier and safer than learning to drive a car. Really, there's not much traffic. The fish do tend to get out of the way. They don't go all that fast either. So this was my first experience in being a submarine pilot. But then for 5 years, the Sustainable Seas expeditions that the National Geographic funded using both that deep rover sub that was built across the bay and a number of these little fellows that are built in Canada, Vancouver, by nuclear research. Again, scientists can drive these things. In fact, a 10-year-old kid was able to get in this and zoom around a bit in the water. The president of the National Geographic was actually in this system. And during the Sustainable Seas expeditions that operated around the coastline of this country and down into Mexico and Belize for a short time, over 5 years, with support from the Richard and Reuben Golden Foundation, again, hoo-ha for San Francisco, and the people who live here who tend to give back, gave to make the expedition possible with NOAA and with the National Geographic, and more than 50 partners and more than 100 scientists teamed up. We had teachers and students with student summits around the coastline. It was really in support of the concept that Brian Baer just described, to have a marine protected area, something that wasn't necessary going back to the middle of the 20th century because we hadn't yet armed ourselves with technologies that have been so powerful in terms of extracting from the ocean. It wasn't until 1947 in the Gulf of Mexico that the first offshore oil well was established out of sight of land. Of course, California's had its share of oil drilling and oil accidents, but nothing like the Gulf of Mexico, where thousands of leaks have been put in place. And we benefited from that too. We're burning the lights right now thanks to burning fossil fuels. I zoomed across the Bay Bridge, burning some fossil fuels. All of us have big carbon footprints, but the thing is, now we know that it makes a difference how we live. And if we use that power that we have to anticipate the future, knowing that what we do now shapes the future, we have the power to make choices. And we make choices about what we eat, choices about what we drive, choices about a lot of things. And I choose to go diving whenever I can. Using these little battery-powered submersibles. There's even a 2-person version. Glue 2 of them together. And 3-person system that operates in Costa Rica, was built here in California. I just hope that all of you will put it on your bucket list. We must get out in the ocean. Masts and fins and snorkel, that's a great way to start. My mother was 81 when she finally took the plunge. And if you're here tonight, she'd say, don't wait until you're 81. If you are 81, don't wait any longer, but you can do it as long as you breathe. You can get in the water. And even if you have trouble breathing, you can get into a submarine, you can get into a car. or an ambulance or whatever. Get out there, down there. It's glorious to explore the blue heart of the planet. It's great. I mean, here at the Steinhardt Aquarium, the fish are on the inside, and we're on the outside. You get in a little submarine. It's the other way around. And so you are in the people area, or whatever it is, with the fish looking in. It's just so exciting to see the development of access to the sea using manned and woman submersibles, and also remotely operated systems that now are able to at least probe here and there in the ocean. But think of what is ahead of us. Only about 5% of the ocean below diver depth has been seen at all. Let alone explored or put on a big battleship. Okay, so how does the world work? We're getting pretty good at looking at the skies above the surface of the world, and we're getting better about acknowledging the role of the ocean in terms of generating literally most of the oxygen in the atmosphere, taking up most of the carbon. We credit trees, and we should, but we've got to give credit to those little tiny green and alien creatures that are in the water and that keep us alive. Diving, to me, it's like diving into the history of life on Earth. Just so many variations on the theme of life that occur only in the sea. Only about half of them have ever made it to land, but nearly all, or essentially all of them, the big divisions of life, of microbes, of the protista, of support animals and plants, kingdoms, fire, so on down the list. Here you catch a glimpse of one of the lovely deep sea creatures that you won't find typically scuba diving. And you can see creatures that rival the oldest living things on land. Some of these corals that I saw while diving in the gym suit, and that last December I saw from the Pisces of the University of Hawaii, have been dated to be thousands of years old. Thousands of years. Some of those in shallow water that we think of as corals and coral reefs are faster growing. Some of them can be centuries and even thousands of years old. But the deep sea corals that are just beginning to come into focus as we gain access to the sea, they're really old. Think of what the world was like 7,000 years ago when some of these deep sea corals got their start. Or 5,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, or 100 years ago. They were out there just doing their thing, munching on the plankton as it goes by, adding a little branch now and then. Today, the fleet of deep diving subs, they can go to the average depths of the ocean, 2.5 miles, or to the average depth, which is about 4.5 miles, or to the maximum depth, which is 11 kilometers, 7 miles. You know, Russia has 6 submarines that can go to 6,000 meters. China has one that goes to 7,000 meters. France has one 6,000 meters. India is building one 6,000 meters. The United States had the 6,000 meter subs, subsequently retired, the Seacliff. We have the Alban that is about to take the plunge to get back in the ocean at 4,000 meters. And someday it too will go to 6,000 meters. But there was James Cameron last March, a year ago, who went to full ocean depth and came back. He was the third person to do so. The first two, 1960. Big gap. What are we thinking? Between 1960 and Cameron's dive in 2012, think of the progress we made going high in the sky. People walked on the moon, astronauts, Skylab, the space station. And what are we doing in the ocean? Well, we'll get there. We've will. But it takes us, our voices, to suggest, let's do it. Let's go onward and upward, but let's also go onward and downward. And again, across the bay in Alameda, the dreams are coming into focus. Maybe in San Francisco soon there will be the reality of three-person subs that can go to 1,000 meters. And then maybe in the not-too-distant future, subs that can take more than just one person, more than just two people, take three people to basically cruise along at the greatest ocean depth. We can already send robots there, not too many. Let's see. Japan had one, and they lost it in the storm. Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution has one, and it's been in the deepest part of the ocean now 9 times, observing life, bringing back news about not just the deepest part of the ocean, but the water column. You know, the ocean is not just the top, and it isn't just the bottom where everybody seems to want to race to get to the bottom. It's the juicy bit in the middle. It's the ocean that really counts, that we need to explore. Well, while we're sitting here, this odd-looking machine is actually at Lake Tahoe exploring, actually jumping through hoops in anticipation of ultimately going through a kilometer of ice in Antarctica to see what's going on beneath the ice. Not an easy place for humans to get to. So we need robots to be our eyes and ears and cameras and other sensors. And later this year, it's anticipated that this odd-looking slim machine that will go through a 22-inch borehole down 1 kilometer through the ice and then 2 or 3 more kilometers under the ice to bring back the news. We are gaining access to the sea, and it's high time, too. Learning about hydrothermal vents that were just discovered in the late 1970s, the life that lives in it, chemosynthesis that may rival photosynthesis in terms of driving the way ocean food webs work. These creatures, Rachel Carson had no clue about these, neither did Jacques Cousteau when he began diving in the ocean. So many things we're learning. The census of marine life that came to a 10-year conclusion in 2011 actually verified that the deeper scientists explored in the ocean, either by looking at the old records, making current explorations, or anticipating what's out there, the deeper they go, the less we know, and the more new things we find. Well, it's a nice, obvious, duh kind of correlation. It's not just depth, though. It's also time that matters when it comes to thoughtful, meaningful exploration. Whether it's in mountains, or forests, or deserts, it's certainly in the ocean. And on 10 different occasions, starting in 1970, I've had a chance to actually stay underwater for a week, sometimes 2 weeks at a time, to sleep with a fish, to actually be out there watching the same fish over and over, get to know them, their behavior, their personalities. Aquarius is this country's space station in the sea. It is not well funded, unfortunately, not like the space station in the sky, but Aquarius has been, for the last 20 years, successful in enabling people to explore and document a place in the Florida Keys, near Key Largo, getting long-term observations of change in a beautiful coral reef system, getting to see the interactions of creatures when there was a die-off of the sea urchins. We could see that in that reef. The arrival of the lionfish in that 20-year period has been noted. Now they are in the reef where Aquarius sits. And scientists, lucky ones such as I, lucky ones such as perhaps one of you, in fact, Jean-Michel Cousteau's son, Fabien, that would be Jacques Cousteau's grandson, is going to stay for 31 days in this underwater laboratory in October of this year and cycle kids through. When I say kids, I don't mean 9-year-olds, but teenagers and scientists to actually experience what it's like to be, ta-da, an aquanaut, to use fancy equipment like this hard hat that enables you to speak to your fellow divers, and much actually, as I found out last July, about this time last July, walking around on the bottom of the ocean under the Aquarius, linked with a hardwire connection back to the laboratory that in turn was linked to a connection to the skies above. I was in a moment of, what was it? Bliss? No, it was a moment of Zen on Fox News. It's so cool to be able to live underwater because, you know, you're not actually soaking wet all the time, only as many hours of the day as you want to go in and out. There's this lovely liquid door that you go into or out of. It's a swimming pool that has access to the sea beyond. Inside, you're warm and dry. Outside, you're a diver, you're a fish. You're in that liquid part of the ocean. You really get to see, up close and personal, many variations on the theme of life that have no counterpart on land. And most have no representation even in freshwater. A few freshwater sponges, not many, but there are no ctenophores at all, anywhere except in the sea. So many beautiful creatures. Well, you know, if you're divers, and I suspect there are a lot of you out there, and if you aren't already, what are you waiting for? What are you sitting here in this room for? You've got to get out there and see things like the giant squid, the ultimate calamari. That giant squid was almost considered a mythological creature until earlier this year, when a fellow scientist, Dr. Edith Ritter, whose specialty is bioluminescence, in a little submarine like the ones I've been showing you, with Japanese colleagues, there were 3 scientists actually in a little submarine, who witnessed the giant squid off the coast of Japan, and they baited it with bioluminescence. What a clever idea. That was Dr. Witter's concept. It's her specialty. So, there we are. There are giant squids, allegedly, just over the edge from where the Aquarius is resting in the Florida Keys. So it's always a thought when you're swimming at night. Are you going to see one of those big tentacles wrap around your foot? Inside, you know, it's great to write your notes, have the fish look in at you while you look out at them. Creatures actually set up housekeeping on the outside of this, adopted it as like an artificial reef, similar to California's giant sea bass, the Goliath grouper, or just the neatest creatures. They're so curious. They're like big dogs. Come out and follow you around, living underwater. I mean, I've been diving maybe 1,000 hours before the first time I had a chance to stay for a prolonged period underwater. It's when I actually got to look at fish swimming around like this that I realized that they have faces and everyone is different. I challenge you, go to the tanks here, look at the fish, and go to a place where you have several of the same kind and look for the differences. The fish that would swim through this audience tonight might say, people, they all look alike. But maybe at first glance we do, but if you really look at us, we know we're all different. And every human who's ever been is different. Every fish that has ever been in the ocean, or wherever, they're all different. And getting a chance to just those who work here at the Steinberg or at the Aquarium of the Bay, they know everyone, it isn't just that they look different, they have personalities. My daughter volunteered here years ago. Well, all my 3 kids volunteered here when we were getting slave labor. Feed the fish, scrub the tanks, whatever it is. But they got to see this. I mean, it was so natural for them. those fish behave differently. Their face is different. People get it with birds. They get it with cats and dogs. We're beginning to understand that with fish as well. Why is it taking us? Now we know that every one of the biggest fish in the ocean, the giant whale sharks, have spots that are recognizable. Every one like a fingerprint. And now there's like a rogues gallery of whale sharks, so that scientists don't have to necessarily put a tag to know their ramblings. They just take a photograph, they are self-tagged. And there are computer models now that make matches and make it possible to track these animals where they go. So now we know what we couldn't know half a century ago, or in some cases far less time than that. One thing we know is that sharks aren't bad guys. The way we used to think, I thought, a good shark is a dead shark. That's what I was told as a kid. And that I had to watch out for the man-eaters. And then I realized I didn't have to worry about that. Man-eaters? Now we have to worry about man-eating sharks because so many are killed now. So in the 1980s, this country, with taxpayer support, NOAA, the National Marine Fisheries Service, actually encouraged the killing of sharks and the marketing of them to Asian markets because they were regarded as an underutilized species. And I was there in the year of the ocean, 1980, and asking questions. Are you sure that's a good idea? Yeah, there are lots of sharks out there, but they live a long time, they reproduce slowly. And if we diminish the number of sharks, the ocean won't be the healthy, robust place that it is when sharks are plentiful. Oh, now we know. And California, hoo-ha, we have taken action here in a leadership role to take care of sharks in ways that other nations, other states, but other nations too, are beginning to catch on to the importance of protecting these important animals. 90% of them are gone. We have the capacity. We've demonstrated it time and time again, on the land, in the air, and now in the ocean. We've certainly demonstrated our capacity to eliminate the big animals on the land. One of my favorite people on the planet, Ed Wilson at Harvard, the Ant-Man, says that over time, human beings eliminated many of the large, the slow, and the tasty animals from the land. Well, we started that more than 10,000 years ago. It's how we made a living in the early days. But today, we don't have to kill sharks. We don't have to kill whales. And we don't have to kill as many fish as we're now killing. In fact, if we keep it up, there won't be much in the way of fish left to kill, given our capacity to take at an unsustainable level. So people still do take whales. I was at Tokyo Fish Market a year ago, and yes, whale meat is there for sale. And although we've come to really admire and respect and love most of our fellow mammals, maybe all of them, we haven't come to admire and respect and love all of the fish, except on our plate. And, bluefin tuna. Oh, who thought ever that bluefin tuna could be maybe at the point of extinction? Well, here we are. We love them so much that we're loving them to death. And actions may be taking time. There are still bluefin tuna and other tuna species out there. But if you love them, if you love them to eat, if you love them to eat, give them a break right now so that there can be some tuna in the future. Hey, 10% is not enough from where we were when I was a kid. Orange trophy. It takes 30 years to mature. Maybe a century old when they arrive on your plate. Now, how about that? How about that rockfish in Alaska? It was taken a few weeks ago that is aged to be 200 years. My goodness. Not exactly the sustainable source of groceries. And I think what's coming into focus is that life in the ocean while it did sustain our ancestors long ago to some extent, and does some people even today, we have choices. We have choices. And if we want to choose a healthy ocean, a healthy future, we have to think about what makes the ocean function. Well, what makes a coral reef function, in part, are healthy populations of fish and lobsters and shrimp and crabs and all those other things. If you take away the fish, the reefs die. If you take away the reefs, the fish die. It's just, we're all connected. If we have an ocean that is in trouble, well, we are in trouble. The ocean is in trouble. Coral reefs are diminished around the world by about half of what they were when I started diving years ago. They aren't all gone, but they are showing a lot of trouble, like this bleached reef that may not die, but it's certainly in trouble. And if bleaching, generally caused by the warming trend that we're experiencing, but it's a lot of things. Take away the fish, they're not as resilient. Part of the system is broken. And we're seeing coral reefs around the world broken. Kelp forests too, one thing after another. We're watching this beautiful blue planet of ours come unraveled. And I think the great news is, now we know. Now we can see what we're doing. It seemed like such a good idea at the time to burn through our fossil fuels, and it's still keeping us going in many ways. And we've gone headlong without always taking care that we should to look out for things like we experienced in 2010. This is such an exciting time because we are not only armed with knowledge, but the ability to communicate in ways that didn't exist not so long ago. I mean, little kids with cell phones in their pockets or with iPads or whatever it is. We have unprecedented access to what the world has learned over all preceding history. And one thing we know now is we have to take care of the systems that take care of us. And one that is on the other side of the country, the Atlantic Ocean. The equivalent in some ways of kelp forests, brown algae, but not anchored the way kelp forests are. Floating forests. It looks a little bit like something that James Cameron would dream up, where you have these floating forests filled with exotic creatures that call this place home. Where the kelp forests have creatures that occur there and nowhere else. All at risk because of actions that we now are taking. The turtles that live in the kelp, in the floating golden forests of sargassum weed, that also occur in the Gulf of Mexico as well as in the Sargasso Sea, are at risk because of these actions of ours. Something new in the ocean, in mostly the last century, the introduction of lightweight, durable, plastic materials that are clogging the ocean systems. But again, now we know that what we put into the ocean harms our life support system. Good news, kids, teenagers are out taking stuff out of the ocean. There's a young woman in Texas who began the coastal ocean cleanup. Nobody asked her to do it. Linda Marinas, back in the 1980s, started picking up the trash. And it's something all of us can do one way or the other to make a difference. But we can also make a difference by not letting it get there in the first place. Here's the thing. We, unlike any other creatures on Earth, can look back over the last 100,000 years. Actually, we can look back over millions of years. We can look back over 4.5 billion years. But just in the past 100,000 years, knowing what we know by looking at ice cores, knowing what we know by using our brains to explore the past, we can see that the last 10,000 years have been remarkably stable compared to the 90,000 years and the long period that preceded it.
we have enjoyed this amazing time when everything that we think of as human civilization has been developed. Yes, there were human creatures going back long before 10,000 years, but writing, numbers, the cultures that we think about, our origins, all within this relatively stable part of history. This little blue speck in the universe, that's it. That's all there is. And the question is, now that we know what we're doing, can we make choices that will ensure an enduring future? Will we do, armed with now policies that enable countries who have a coastline embracing the sea out 200 miles, and we use the judgment that is now available to us with knowledge to make better decisions than we have on the land while we still have time? Or look at the blue part of this. It's advancing here, but it's not advancing there. Wait, it's because I'm putting it in the wrong direction. That's why. Okay, the blue part. High seas. It's half the world beyond the national jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of any country. And while we are here in this room, people are deliberating about how to carve up the blue part of the planet. What to do with it? Can we protect it? Can we, at this critical point in history, make decisions that will protect the polar seas, the Arctic, the Antarctic, now more vulnerable than at any time in all of human history? This is the moment. Lucky us, lucky you. We have the choices to make that will pave the way for whatever follows. Will there be penguins in the future? Well, it will depend on human actions with respect to what goes on in the polar regions to the south. Will there be polar bears going forward in the future? Well, human actions will determine the fate of those creatures in the north. Really, what's at risk is those creatures, of course, but most importantly, hold up the mirror. Those are the creatures that are most at risk. Life will go on one way or the other, but our future really depends on respecting the rest of the living world and realizing that what we do to them, we do to ourselves. And that's what we now know as never before. About a year ago, I had a chance to go halfway across the Pacific to meet this bird who's sitting on her most recent egg. At the time, she was 62 years old. Known to be 62 because she had a band on her leg. She'd been banded in the 50s and had been rebanded in the years since then. We know this bird. Her name is Wisdom. And she learned to fly about the same time I was learning to dive. It made me think. I just had to sit there and look at this bird who flies thousands of miles. Some albatrosses that nest at Midway Island come all the way to California to munch on the groceries that are here, the squid and the little silvery fish that are here in abundance. And then they go back and stuff their little fledglings with the food that is gathered from far, far away. So, Wisdom. Imagine what she's seen in 62 years. She's still there. She hatched another chick this year. The hope for her, the hope for us, is that we'll use that special attribute that we have, our minds, like these kids in Hong Kong who 2 years ago gathered together and took the pledge to protect sharks. Like you're taking the pledge, I trust, that Brian Baird's, with his encouragement and mine, to take the pledge to protect California's waters, to protect California's sharks, to protect California's kelp forests. to protect our life support system. I have lots of reasons for wanting to do this. 4 of them are my grandsons. 2 of them are in this picture. You have your own reasons, perhaps, about why you'd like to see the future be at least as good as the present that we are enjoying. It really is up to us to think about it. And then not just think about it, not just say, yeah, I'll sign the pledge, but then do something about it. Use your power, whatever it is. Do you write? Do you sing? Do you get away with numbers? Get away with kids. Use that power so that in another 62 years, those who are looking back at us will salute you, salute us for our wisdom. Thank you.